Today, I wanted to see how fast I could be getting over it after doing 100 speedruns. Getting over it, of course, is the infamous rage game where you're a guy stuck in a pot who can only use his hammer to move around. You use your mouse to control this hammer and travel up a mountain, but if you make a single mistake, you can lose a ton of your progress immediately. This game is painful, so of course I decided why not speedrun it 100 times. But a couple of preliminary things. First of all, the rules for this challenge. I will be doing 100 no reset runs. This means once I start a run, I have to complete it, even if it will tilt my entire soul. And secondly, actually, I think that's the only rule, but onto my skill level for the game. Before this challenge, I had done a total of 21 runs, 11 of which were completed in a previous video, and 10 being done here and there for fun. My personal best time, or PB, was a 9:57. So my ultimate goal for this challenge was to lower that time down to a sub 4-minute run, and here's how it went. But really quickly before we start the challenge, if you end up enjoying the video, please be sure to subscribe. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm, and I just like seeing big number get bigger. Now on run 1, my only goal was to refresh myself about the game's mechanics. I wasn't expecting an amazing time as I hadn't even touched the game in around a month, and I just wanted to get used to its weird controls. Because of this, I'll explain some basic speedrunning tactics and the starting route during run 1. Like I said, this game is about getting to the top of a mountain, and it's a lot easier said than done. Our two basic movements to do this are a pogo stick by pushing downwards to move more vertically, and doing a windmill-like movement to move far either horizontally or vertically, depending on where you do it. You'll see both of these movements a lot in the video. Now the map starts with its beginning area where you can test these mechanics out, and it's not too hard to progress through. But then we need to go upwards. For this, we'll use a mixture of windmills and pogo jumps, being careful not to fall, as it's much more punishing than you might think. Eventually we make it to the chimney, which is one of my least favorite parts of the game. We pogo stick up here and then have to catch ourselves with our hammer. This spot sucks because it's so tight and easy to lose control, but I surprisingly made it through relatively quickly. And after that, we make it to our first completely vertical challenge, where we need to rely on small objects sticking out to go up. This requires a bit of patience and control, but it isn't too bad, and once we get past it, we can shimmy ourselves to the next area. We then have some more basic movement where we jump up to this slide, around to some floating boxes, back down to some more floating boxes, and then we finally climb up this ladder. After that, we do a couple more windmills through several objects until we make it to the top of the furniture stack. After all that, we move to the left for a bit until we make it to the orange. Casually, this spot is awful because if you mess up your pogo, you fall back down to the slide area. My strategy at this time was to pogo directly up though, which usually keeps me pretty safe before slowly climbing up the rocks because they don't give too much grip. Then we'll pogo past the rocks and make it to the castle building. This spot is really scary casually, but it's honestly kind of easy once you understand it. You just pogo up a few things, get hit by a bad jump scare, and make it to the next part of the game, the snow area. In the snow area, we start by traversing to the right for a while until we make it to another frustrating part, the hat jump. For this jump, you need to perfectly line up your pogo and pull directly down to get just enough height and grab onto this rock. Then we need to dodge the gigantic hat so we don't fall down again and continue on our way. And after that is the anvil jump, which is pretty much just a pogo stick with a few windmills and a couple more floating rocks that aren't too hard to deal with if you take a bit more time and play it smart. And now it's time for my second least favorite part of the game, the bucket jump. In this part, we need to pogo onto the bucket, grab it with our hammer, and hoist ourselves into safety with one swing. The annoying part is the bucket's pretty small and will move if you push it. This makes it really easy to miss, especially when it's swinging. I actually lost a lot of time in my relatively good first run here, so that kinda sucked, but once we made it up, we were in a pretty safe spot. Because the snow mountain we come up to looks tough, but it's actually kinda simple. There are notches in the mountain that we can memorize the positions of and use to lift our player. For the first part, I usually like to span windmills up because it's not too punishing, and then I'll be more careful for the second steeper part. But with all that out of the way, we finally make it to the final difficult obstacle, the tower. This is another pretty simple vertical area where we just need to be kinda patient and climb up with some windmills. Sometimes your hammer can get stuck on these objects though, so that can be frustrating, but it all works out eventually and we make it into space. Here we can finish out the run by bouncing off some floating space rocks, getting higher until we finally see the credits and end off time. Oh, and another thing, even though I use a timer, the official speedrun time is the in-game one. So while my timer says I got a 12:06, I actually got a 12:05, so I'll take the free second. And honestly, this run blew all my expectations out of the water. I wasn't expecting to get this close to a PB this fast, so that definitely gave me the confidence to get a sub 10 run. And then for run 2, everything felt amazing. I was warmed up and knew I wouldn't make any mistakes. Gravity, on the other hand, very much disagreed with me. I somehow still had an easily PB-able run though, until the bucket, of course, and ended with a 12:02, so at least I saved 33 seconds, I guess. But this was when run 3 happened. This run just broke my heart. I had a really good early game and decided why not try slide skip. See, we can skip the entire slide portion of getting over it with a well-positioned windmill on this corner. It's not that difficult of a trick and saves a lot of time, so I decided I might as well at least try to implement it, even if I've never used it in speedruns before. And somehow, I actually got it my very first try, and then fell. So I decided to use this run as a practice run and get more consistent at slide skip because I was tilted. Like I said earlier, I wasn't allowed to reset the run, but I could use it for practice and finish it with the worst time. Nothing in my self-made rules against that loophole. So I found this very specific setup where you need to line up your player and pull directly down. If you're really good at the game, this isn't needed at all, but let's be honest, I wasn't at that level yet. I decided to practice this over and over again and got pretty consistent at it before finishing this subpar run and hopefully getting onto a better run. Just please, please, I need a PB. And a PB is just what I got. This run was interesting as it started with me failing slide skips several times, but I just didn't really let it faze me. I remember thinking this is just time I would have lost going up the normal way, so it wasn't even actually a time loss. And once I finally got my slide skip, I played the game close to perfectly. I was just a machine, moving my player in ways that I didn't even think I had in me. I even got bucket first time, which is definitely what this run needed. In the end, I made it to space around 8:09 and exited 33 seconds later. So yeah, my space needed some work to not waste time equal to literally half of the world record, but it was my first real PB and I was satisfied with it. Now after this, not much interesting happened for a bit. In a game like Getting Over It, the best way to get better when you're starting out is playing it over and over again. Each time you get a bit more comfortable with the game and get the courage to do riskier strats since you feel like you're a better player. At this time, I felt good at the game, but nowhere near good enough to learn more difficult skips and tricks. At least not yet. So the next couple of runs were just grinding to get a better time. And yeah, I might have just went on this whole rant because I made mistake after mistake in my next 4 runs and didn't even get close to PBing, but it's a process, right? At least saying that will hopefully help me sleep at night. And if things couldn't get even worse, in run number 9, I almost got the bad ending. If you didn't know, you can accidentally place your pickaxe on one side of the final tower and you on the other. If you go down far enough, it's impossible to get back. I did save myself, but it heavily affected my mental. I wanted to finish one last run for the night though, so I went back and it was actually pretty interesting. I fell at the orange, messed up the bucket, messed up space, and made a few more mistakes here and there, but somehow still PB'd by 3 seconds. That really just goes to show you how much time I can save by just bettering myself at the game. So I slept for the night after all the runs and got back on the next day for run 11. It was a disaster. I thought sleeping would magically make me amazing at the game, you know, refreshing your mind and all that, but that didn't happen at all. I fell in countless places, failed the same parts over and over again, and got a time way worse than my first run of the challenge. It wasn't the greatest feeling. But because the run was going so bad, I decided to use it to learn some faster strats instead of just failing the same old slow ones. I semi-learned to set up less slide skip, learned how to do a faster orange mountain area, even if I failed right after, and got a lot better at doing the mountain faster without needing to slowly go up the second part. My hope was I could slowly incorporate these things I learned into my later runs as I saw fit. Then we'll just skip past run 12 and 13 because they weren't anything too special, but on run 14, this happened. Yes, I messed up so bad that I fell off the entirety of the map and got all the way to the start. Literally heartbreaking. So I'll be honest, I couldn't continue this run. It would just be too much of a pain, especially since we were all the way back at the beginning, and that could make a run that should have been a PB into one that isn't. So let's just slightly change our single rule. No resetting unless you mess up so bad that you're back at the start of the map. Yeah, that seems a little better. And resetting was a good thing because right after it, we finally got another PB. Slide skip, easy. Orange mountain, easy. Even bucket jump and mountain, pretty close to easy. The run was going so well that it could easily sub 6 minutes, and then space happened. Just What did I do? I ended up wasting over a minute in space by refusing to go up. Whatever though, I guess I'm just gonna improve this PB anyway. And then came my next 6 runs, which weren't too pretty. I played over and over, getting adequate times, but nowhere close to a PB. To a certain extent, it felt like I was plateauing. Like I said earlier, when you start playing getting over it, you naturally get better each run. But after doing run number 20, I realized this rule would no longer cut it. Sure, I could do everything perfectly and probably PB by around a minute, but the perfect run is really hard to come by, and that was still nowhere near my sub 4 minute goal. That meant it was time for some more learning. This is when I started looking at videos of other speedrunners who got the sub 4 minute time that I wanted. If I could start imitating their movement, I could possibly improve to that level. So here's where we get to the part of the video where movement is everything. In the next few runs, I tried to implement this technique. It's a much faster pogo that lets you immediately jump with no setup needed. I practiced it for a while on run 21 just to get used to the technique, and it seemed like it wouldn't be too difficult. Obviously that was wrong though. In the middle of a run, it's pretty hard to pull off, but I was getting better. I decided to play fast no matter what. It didn't matter if I was making easy mistakes or doing things that playing a bit slower would solve. If I trained myself now to play fast, it would be useful later, because all I was really worried about is the final time after run 100. And with the next few runs, I was clearly improving. The movement was continuously looking cleaner, and every time I felt like I could PB by a lot, only to have one mistake ruined it all. My next PB came in at run 27, where I just missed the sub 6 minute. It mostly came down to the regular mistakes, bucket and space, which kinda sucks because I felt like I could have even gotten the sub 5 if I just played a bit better, but at the very least, it excited me for the prospect of future runs. And then the rest of the day sucked. Typical. But I got up next morning and started the grind again, and pretty much immediately I finally got my sub 6 run on number 32, except I forgot to record it. But I wrote down that it was a 5:42, so that's pretty nice. Anyways, we then went into the worst moment of this entire challenge. It took me 28 more runs until I got my next PB, and it was not a fun 28 runs. I did stay determined and kept doing better, but it was a mental load. I would constantly get close to PBing, only to lose at one thing at the end, and it kinda destroyed me. Along with that, I also started dealing with the mental stress of playing getting over it 100 times within a relatively short amount of time. Stressful game is stressful, who would have guessed? So because of those things, I had to take more breaks and ended up having a lot more subpar runs. See, whenever I took a break from getting over it and went back to it, I needed 1 or 2 runs to warm up again. This meant within this time, at least a fifth of my runs were just warming up, and then I could get serious for the following ones before having to stop again. It was an interesting cycle, and honestly that problem might just come from this challenge in general. Getting over it isn't an amazing game to improve on just by doing straight runs, at least once you're past your beginner phase, even though I might have thought it would be. In all reality, I should have used a practice mod pack to really grind out areas instead of learning a tiny bit more each run. But I'm making YouTube content, whatever. One thing I did do to make me a little bit happier though is change our one and only rule one last time. A lot of runs were starting to be subpar in the early game, which made me dread finishing them. So the rule is now no resetting unless I'm tilted or it's before the snow area. Yeah, I'm not very good at following my own rules, am I? Whatever. Let's go back to a happier note. And that happier note is what I learned throughout these 28 runs. First, I found some better strategies for the bucket where you can quickly grab it and get to the top immediately. I wasn't amazing at it, but I could pull it off every once in a while. Secondly, my mountain climbing was starting to get insane. The more I played, the more I could react quickly and go to the next notch. This meant I pretty much always did it fairly fast, and sometimes could get there faster than I thought I'd ever be able to. Thirdly, I actually learned the physics behind pole pogos. This is where you transfer your speed from a windmill into a pogo and get insane height. It can be really helpful in a lot of areas where you need to climb high. And then of course there's also the chimney, which I got fairly good at. I just learned how to not destroy my run every time by being a bit gentler. And finally, slide skip. If you remember before, I had to use this awkward way of doing slide skip where I put myself at a very precise angle and directly pulled down. The problem is it would always waste at least some time to set up. Now though, I learned that you can just do this, which saves a good amount of time and is more consistent. So overall, my mountains of failed runs were crushing me, but did help me in becoming better at the game, and I'd finally get the chance to show that after 2 terrible horrible runs that both were ruined to the final tower. See, I somehow got worse at the tower within this section of time. I would get stuck much more often, and it would kill way too many runs. On number 59, I missed an almost sub 5 because of the tower and didn't even PB, and then on 60, I also had the run ruined to the tower and got the most unsatisfying PB of my life. Yeah, it's tough out here. Finally though, we made progress just 2 runs later on number 62. Things went well, I did what I needed, and most importantly, I didn't ruin my speedrun to the tower. I lost a minute on the bucket though. Anyways, that didn't matter for too long because 5 runs later, I got another PB for the time of 4:57. And I gotta say, this part was feeling really good. Finally, I was making progress and my practice was paying off. All I still really had problems with was the bucket and the tower, and that only kinda sucks since they're the last 2 hard parts in the run, but... Oh, hey look, I finally realized what my tower problem was. So as I kept playing faster in the game, I also swung faster. On a whim, I tried doing a slow swing on these and didn't get stuck. Yep, that was my entire problem. Whatever, if it works, and it worked well enough for me to get my next PB of a 4:21 on run number 78. I was actually getting close to my goal. All I needed to do was shave a final 21 seconds off my time in 22 runs. But it was going to be tough. I couldn't make any mistakes, I couldn't take time for setups, I couldn't even think. I just had to play out of my mind. Yeah, I didn't PB. I'm just happy I'm done, man. Leave a like if you want me to do this with another game.